Today I'm going to take you through how you move a volunteer from making an application with you right through to them commencing with you. So on FreddyMatch, we have two terms that are important here. First of all, it's application. If a volunteer is interested in your volunteering opportunity, they will make an application. You will immediately see that application within your realization of either FreddyMatch Basic or FreddyMatch Manager, which is what I'm going to show you today. So when a volunteer makes an application, they're expressing interest essentially in the opportunity that you have advertised. Now, if you're an individual charity and you've advertised an opportunity, you'll see that application and you can take it through exactly the same steps. What I'm showing you here is FreddyMatch Manager, which is our full service volunteer management service. And within this, we just have a few more features that we can talk about. So volunteer makes an application, we move them through the stages, and hopefully they're the perfect volunteer for your organization, and we can move them into what we call a role. So on FreddyMatch, application comes first. Once an application is marked complete, the volunteer automatically gets entered into a role. This means they are actively volunteering with the organization that they've applied to. So let's dig in. Today at a glance, as you can see here, I've got one outstanding application that I need to deal with. If I click on view, I can see that volunteer 1 has made an application. I can click on it and I can see who they've made an application to and what the role is. So in this stage, we've got community champion. So this application here, they've come through and they've applied to community champion, and that is with the Freddy Bear Foundation. Now in FreddyMatch Manager, you can manage multiple programs or services or indeed multiple member organizations. So in this case, FreddyMatch Manager is managing the charity, the Freddy Bear Foundation. So if I need a little refresher, I can just click and recall who the Freddy Bear Foundation are, and I can also see what other opportunities they have available listed on FreddyMatch. That's fantastic. So I'll pop back to this tab and I can see here that volunteer 1 got their key information here, and I can see what they're applying for, and I can see any supporting text they've provided for their application. If I want to know a little bit more about volunteer 1, I can click on see more and pop open their tab. Here I can view their personal details that they have added to FreddyMatch, any preferences they have in terms of availability, commitment, and location, and I can also see what skills and interests they have. I can view all the applications that they've ever made, regardless of status. And importantly, I can also see what they are currently doing, i.e. who they're currently volunteering with via this roles feature. So if I look here at my applications, I've got various applications, various statuses. We can see these bottom 3, the application has been complete. That means they've moved through the process and they're actively doing these roles. So in this situation, this volunteer is potentially continuing to do 3 roles. Here, this is the one that needs my attention up top. It said contacted. So look here, and I can see that volunteer 1 has been contacted and will schedule an interview. So this may be somebody else in your team has picked this up and they've just dropped you a note to say, hey, we've already contacted volunteer 1 and we'll schedule an interview. So right here, depending on what your workflow is, you might just make a little note and say, gave volunteer 1 a call and booked in interview for Thursday, the 8th. Okay, and then I can move this to interview and I can update. And it's really nice and simple there. You've immediately just given a bit more information and updated the status. Now, because this is now in interview status and also in contacted status, the volunteer will have automatically been notified that somebody has picked up the application and has started looking at it. They won't see the individual statuses that you see, but they will certainly know that somebody is dealing with their application. This is really, really important. Then too often, it's easy for a volunteer's application to fall through the cracks and they're left wondering what's going on. But on FreddyMatch, the volunteer gets notified as soon as you click a button or change a status. So just to look at the other statuses here, we have referred, accepted, declined, and complete. So a normal process for an organization would probably be you start off with applied, you utilize some of these steps, and then you either accept or decline that volunteer. If you accept the volunteer, what we then ask is that the volunteer is accepted, and on the day they start, or around about that day, the day they start doing that volunteering role, you mark their application as complete. So you can start tracking the number of hours they do And you're also allowing yourself to see what that volunteer is actively doing. So they can see that in their profile and you can see that in your profile as well. Now on FreddyMatch Manager, you can see what the volunteer is actively doing, and so can your member organization. So if I use these statuses here, referred, just to explain that a little bit more, referred on FreddyMatch Manager allows you to refer a volunteer to an individual program or service, or indeed to a member organization. You perhaps may have a number of charities that you support to find volunteers, and so you can refer volunteers to those charities. Once you've selected referred, the status can only then be changed to accepted or declined. So you can't go backwards. Volunteer is referred, so then it's up to either you here on FreddyMatch Manager or the member organisation or program or service to accept or decline that volunteer. Declined is also used when a volunteer just decides it's not the right role for them and they don't want to proceed further. So it's not necessarily a charity rejecting a volunteer application. It can be both ways there. So let's just say we've gone through this process and we ultimately mark the volunteer as complete. But actually, as we can see from volunteer 1, they've been through this process a couple of times, and here we can see that their roles here are complete. So then if we click on any of these applications that have been complete, you can see that because it's complete, it's generated a role. So if I go into the role here, I can see that I have the option to change the status. So again, you have some statuses with the roles, and you can also add any notes. So you might just add some notes about volunteer 1. So volunteer 1, maybe there's not a performance review exactly, but a check-in point. Volunteer 1 at check-in after 2 months reports that the role is going really well. Okay, and the status is ongoing, so no need to change that, and we can just update that. We can see here with the status, if the volunteer stops for a short while, you can use the suspended status, and that just temporarily pauses the role, so we stop tracking the hours, for example. And then perhaps their time with that organisation is finished and they complete. Now, at that point of completion, again, you can add some information. Volunteer 1 decided that they were going to finish up with this role because they've applied and been successful to a new role and a different organisation. So that's just that status key there. We also have a function for the volunteer to provide a review. Now, this is entirely optional, but sometimes it's really good to get volunteer feedback on the different roles. So it might be that the volunteer says, hey, I love this role, but actually I found out that this organisation also does X, Y, and Z, and I'm really keen to get involved in that. So, and when I asked the organisation, they were more than happy for me to do that. So that just gives you a little bit more of a flavour about how the volunteer is going in the role as well. When your role is complete here, if you mark that as complete, we can still view that in the role list. So if I look at the role list for volunteer 1, we would notice that So just a final point there on the different roles. So we've got roles here as ongoing and complete. So even when a volunteer has completed their role and they've finished up at that organisation, you will still have a record of that time that they've spent volunteering with that organisation, and also the number of hours they've spent volunteering with that organisation. That's really important to see a volunteer's full history, and that is also displayed on the volunteer's profile. Whether you use this for reward or recognition or, just for your own metrics, it's really great to capture a full picture of an individual volunteer's activity. So when the time comes, you can thank them, and you can also just advertise what a great impact volunteers are having in the community.